What's up, party people? We are back, and this is Nahum chapter 3. So we are going to jump in here. Woe to the bloody city, all full of lies and plunder, no end to the prey. The crack of the whip and rumble of the wheel, galloping horse and bounding chariot, horsemen charging, flashing sword and glittering spear, hosts of slain, heaps of corpses, dead bodies without end. They stumble over the bodies. And all for the countless whorings of the prostitute, graceful and of deadly charms, who betrays nations with her whorings and peoples with her charms. So, not exactly a gentle picture here. Woe to the bloody city. As I've mentioned in the other videos, Assyria was a very bloody culture. They were were militant. They went and they plundered other cities, and they were a war nation. They were very powerful. They were very brutal and bloody. That's how they made their money, was by force. And so it's a picture here of somebody that basically went out and tried to get everything they could through violence. I don't know about you, but this seems like a lot of cultures today in America is using whatever power they have to make money instead of doing the right thing. There's no integrity. That's why people get upset about large corporations or even the illegal immigrants coming in and trying to get jobs. There's, arguments on both sides. If I was on the other side of the border and I saw an opportunity to go into America to provide for my family, what would I do? So I put myself in that situation, and it makes you think, right? It's not. It is, in one sense, it's very black and white, and in another, it's very gray. But these issues of people not having integrity and trying to do things in a godly way, in a God-honoring way, the Assyrians didn't care about honoring God. They cared about what they wanted, and they took it by force. So, behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts. I will lift up your skirts over your face, and I will make nations look at your nakedness and kingdoms at your shame. I will throw filth at you and treat you with contempt and make you a spectacle. And all who look at you will shrink from you and say, wasted is Nineveh. Who will grieve for her? Where shall I seek comforters for you? So there's this, who will grieve for her, the answer to the rhetorical question, right? Nobody's going to grieve for Assyria or Nineveh. There were enemies all around. Even the people that were cheering them on were just doing it probably because they were getting financial gain from this whole setup or taking part in the spoils of the Assyrian efforts. So the contempt here, again, the examples that God makes of enemies in the Bible, I think it overlooks, like when people talk about this being a violent God. Well, what is the response to a violent person? What does justice look like to a violent people? What does that look like? And is it for people to decide, or is it for God to decide? These are important questions that we're confronted with when we read the prophets. So it goes on, are you better than Thebes that sat by the Nile with water around her rampart a sea and water her wall? Cush was her strength, Egypt too, and that without limit. Put and the Libyans were her helpers. So this is interesting because besides the aspect that Nineveh was destroyed in 612 BC, we know that historically from a lot of records and archaeological evidence, everything, right? As well as evidence from the Bible. But this is an interesting passage to me because it's showing Thebes that sat by the Nile. So it's talking about Thebes being destroyed, Cush, Egypt, Put, and the Libyans, right? This helps us date this biblical text, actually. So when texts like this pop up, and we have a general idea when Nahum lived, but this actually narrows down the time period in which this could have been written or prophesied. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing as well. There are little bits and pieces that the prophets leave to kind of help us understand when they were written. So verse 10, we pick up, yet she became an exile. She went into captivity. Her infants were dashed in pieces at the head of every street. For her honored men, lots were cast, and all her great men were bound in chains. You also will be drunken. You will go into hiding. You will seek a refuge from the enemy. All your fortresses are like fig trees with first-ripe figs. If shaken, they fall into the mouth of the eater. So easy pickings for God to come in there and wipe out these fortresses. Behold, your troops are women in your midst. The gates of your land are wide open to your enemies. Fire has devoured your bars. I think I talked a little bit about this in the past chapter. I got this mixed up. The references to fire here in chapter 3, as it continues on the destruction of Nineveh, there's actually extensive fire damage in the Nineveh archaeological digs and records of what happened when Babylon took over Assyria, when Nineveh fell. So, draw water for the siege, strengthen your forts, go into the clay, tread the mortar, take hold of the brick mold. There will the fire devour you. The sword will cut you off. It will devour you like the locust. Multiply yourselves like the locust, multiply like the grasshopper. You increased your merchants more than the stars of the heavens. The locust spreads its wings and flies away. So it's talking about how they increased their merchants. There was a lot of wealth. There was a lot of money, gold, silver that was brought into Nineveh. And like many other places in the Bible, it says that's fleeting. That's a joy that can be destroyed. That's a resource that can be destroyed. Jesus has parables about, it's not about what the moth will eat and time will destroy. It's about the everlasting things. That's what's important. So it goes on to say, your princes are like grasshoppers, your scribes like clouds of locusts, setting on the fences in a day of cold. When the sun rises, they fly away. No one knows where they are. Your shepherds are asleep, O king of Assyria, your nobles slumber. Your people are scattered on the mountains with none to gather them. There is no easing your hurt, your wound is grievous. All who hear the news about you clap their hands over you, for upon whom has not come your unceasing evil. So I think this is kind of a good take too. Your princes, your scribes, so people in authority, like the magistrates, the people that were in authority, it says they're gone, they're scattered. No one knows where they are. They didn't stand up for your people. They didn't have integrity. They're gone. Your shepherds are asleep. I think it's important to notice that, or to know that Israel and Judah were very nomadic shepherding communities. It was a big part of their history that they were shepherds. And so tied in with this idea is the idea of judgment of God. And we saw above a scatterer, that he's scattering his enemies. The idea of judgment is almost like a shepherd sorting a flock, or this idea of a punishment coming and spreading people over the face of the planet, like happens in Babel or these other places. And a shepherd would come in and pull the good ones back to him, pull them to refuge, make them safely a part of the flock again. And here it's saying your shepherds are asleep. There's nobody, nobody's going to gather your people up. Once they're scattered, your hopes are dashed. Like, you're done. Like, this is it. God is coming for you and you're done. There is no easing your hurt. Your wound is grievous. All who hear the news about you clap their hands over you, for upon whom has not come your unceasing evil. So I think another really interesting point and takeaway from this is that a lot of people today in Christian circles, they want to say there's almost a universalist or a denial of punishment for God's enemies. And I think that that's a huge mistake, because there are a lot of parables that Jesus tells about unquenching fire, about destruction, about eternally being cut off or cast into the outer darkness. And the whole point of those parables is that there's a time at which this cannot be undone. And here it's showing there's no easing your hurt. Your wound is grievous. So the evil people that have committed evil atrocities and wickedness and committed their sins and then never repent and are never humble, eventually there's going to be a time when those people are denied salvation. They're denied the opportunity to turn and repent. And it looks like God had given Nineveh multiple chances. He sent them multiple prophets. He sent them multiple messages. They repented for a while and were, granted mercy for a while. And then they went back to their sinful ways. And then they're destroyed. I think that that's, ties into the bigger theme of judgment and punishment here. And that ultimately there is a time at which, and, God elects those he elects. He shows mercy on those he has mercy. There's salvation for people that take their refuge in him and are humble, but there is a limit to that. And God knows the hearts of those. And but there is punishment and damnation for those that do not accept God's path to salvation, which is putting your faith in Jesus Christ. So I just think that's right there at the end. This one, I think the last thing I'll point out is that Nahum is funny to me as a prophet, because a lot of the prophets, they talk about other nations and then they turn it into Israel and into Judah and have a takeaway here. But I think the message is pretty abundantly clear that if you're an enemy of God, if you choose to be an enemy of God, then there is going to be punishment and judgment, and it's inescapable. And so I think Israel and Judah would, if the Jewish people, the Hebrews, Jewish people would have recognized that just explicitly. But it's not explicitly called out in Nahum in that way, like it is in other prophets. So I thought that was kind of a unique thing. Anyways, that's all I've got for this. That's Nahum. We'll talk about a couple of the themes coming up, but like and subscribe to catch all these videos as they come out. I really appreciate you hanging out and still doing this Bible study thing and learning a lot. I'm thinking about coming out with a series on the prophets. So like I said, like and subscribe to catch all those as they come out and the rest of the Nahum videos. But with that, I'll catch you in the next video. All right. Thanks. Peace.